Seigenthaler. Once again, welcome to A Word on Words. Our guest is Mark Kemp. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to be talking about Mark's new book, Dixie Lullaby, a story of music, race, new beginnings, and a new South. It's really a story of Mark Kemp.
In a lot of ways it is.
Yes. As I see it, it's really an odyssey, a journey of discovery and then rediscovery, maybe, of your own roots and how you felt about them and how you feel about them.
Right, exactly. It was something that I'd been thinking about for years. I mean, all these issues were things that I've been thinking about and going through for years. And, you know, because I was in the music business already and wrote about music, I just kind of used music as a vehicle to talk about, you know, race issues and cultural change in the South, which is something that I had ambivalence about, to say the least.
You know, when you speak about a book like this, and it has the South and music in the title, if I told any one of our listeners that we were going to be talking about Mr. Cash, they'd think Johnny.
Right.
But there is another Cash, Jack Cash, W.J. Cash, who wrote The Mind of the South. And I was surprised early on to find that he helped you discover how you really felt about the South by telling you about how he felt about it.
He did. I identified a whole lot with W.J. Cash. We both came from small mill towns. We both felt like outcasts in our communities. But we're separated by all these generations, you know. He was a reader. I obsessed over music. And I also noticed that a lot of, you know, I noticed that a lot of books written about the South, or articles written about the South over the years, particularly before and after the Civil Rights Movement, cited Cash. And sometimes, well, Cash's views on the South are filtered through, just like mine are, through his own experiences. And a lot of misperceptions and preconceptions about the South come from Cash's, you know, own inner struggles that he had. And so, you know, when I read Mind of the South, I identified with it a lot. And I thought that I would, by updating the story of the South and the culture of the South, taking it past civil rights, you know, I could maybe have a little effect. I don't know the effect that he had with Mind of the South.
Well, I remember reading it, believe it or not, in the 40s, maybe 1949, and I recall its impact on me. I think I understood myself better. Now, you say at the outset that your parents really were, when it came to race, were not really in sync with the region and its racial attitudes. You tell a story about traveling with a family to Atlanta, and you stopped at the home of a family friend, and the night before, your father sort of saying, you know, where do we go in Atlanta? And he says, you know, they've taken over there.
Right.
And you're very young, but you remember that, and you sense you really didn't like it.
Yeah, it was an ugly feeling. This man was loud and gregarious, you know, big, huge character. And I remember I was, as I write in the book, you know, his son and I were on the floor playing with an iguana. And my dad asks, you know, where should we take the family downtown, you know? And he says, well, you know, the downtown area has been taken over by blacks, so be careful when you're down there. I don't know the word he used, but that's the word I'll use. And I just remember sitting there on that rug with this prehistoric-looking beast, and this guy's expressing a fear of people after himself being this great big character, he's expressing a fear of a whole race of people, and it didn't feel right. And I just remember little things throughout my childhood, hearing things like that from family members, and it just didn't feel right. I didn't understand it.
Talk a little bit about, because it runs through the book from beginning to end. First of all, the way that music inevitably in your generation helped this process of discovery and then rediscovery. Not only were your parents' attitudes not consistent with the racial attitudes, the racist racial attitudes of the South, but beyond that, in a real sense, when the merger of blues and rock begins to take hold, people like the Allmans and Leonard Skinner, Southern boys to the core, that music, for my generation, for your parents' generation, that music was not in sync with their attitudes about what the traditional South was about, even though the music did strike a chord with young people, South and North. Talk about that sort of dichotomy, because it seems to me it's another contradiction. Where did these young men come from? And they had been raised on listening to black music, soul music,
Right.
and they blended it with the emergence of rock, and suddenly
Country too. Yeah, it was a big. You know, music's always, I think, in our culture been, well, in all cultures, but certainly in American culture, been central to change and to healing. I think, you know, from Woody Guthrie, you know,
Sure.
forward. This was after the '60s, in which music played
Sure.
a central part of, you know, and you know, Bob Dylan, with civil rights and the anti-Vietnam sentiments. This was the next generation. When I heard, you know, to me, when I was a kid, I listened to, you know, rock music, what was on the radio, and you know, I associated rock music and pop music with British bands, because, you know, it was post-Beatles and Rolling Stones era. When I first heard the Allman Brothers Band, it kind of rattled me, because these guys had accents that were like mine, Southern accents. They dressed in flannels and jeans. They didn't dress in the glitter and makeup and jumpsuits. And I really identified. They were singing about, you know, blue skies and mountains and Carolina wind, and, you know, things that I could really identify with. And it suddenly, for a young boy in elementary school, right about the time that they were desegregating, this music was showing me. We didn't have a lot of good white role models during that period. You know, young black kids had Martin Luther King Jr. You know, the role models, political role models that we had to look up to were, you know, racist, most of them. And so these musicians, to me, showed me another view